Hello, welcome to Creating Portland. I'm your host, Pearson Kunz, and on this podcast, I'll be interviewing progressive creators who are using their art to shape the culture of our city and beyond. I hope you enjoy this episode of Creating Portland. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Creating Portland. I'm your host, Pearson Kunz, and we are here with a very exciting guest and the first person I am meeting live on the air for the very first time, and I'm so excited to meet them and introduce them to you. This is Stephan Nance, who is a queer, non-binary singer-songwriter specializing in poetic piano pop with abundant bird references, which I'm sure we're going to get into. They perform regularly at So Far Sounds shows and organ birding events. Stephan is currently on their next full album, Sparkbird, and a young adult novel set at Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in Eastern Oregon. Welcome to the pod, Stephan!
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Did I pronounce the name of that park right, is my first question.
Malheur.
Malheur, okay.
Yeah, it's sort of weird because it's French, and so it should be like malheur, but...
Ooh!
Yeah.
Well, we can do that. We can do that on the pod. Well, welcome. We're just so excited to have you here. I've been listening to your music all day long, and let me just tell you, I am obsessed. Let's get into it. Let's formally get into it. The question we ask all of our guests, Stephan, is how are you helping create Portland, its culture, what it is? How are you helping with that?
Well, so I did the math. I knew you were going to ask this, and so I went through my calendar, and I moved here 2 years ago, and technically I've really only been in a fully functional Portland for maybe a year, and the rest of it I was like, it's either been quarantine or I've been on tour. So I haven't been here very long, but I can still answer mostly for the time that feels like forever ago, and so it almost feels like another lifetime. But
the time before the great
the time before
virus.
Yeah. So how I was creating Portland. When I moved here, I was finishing up my most recent album, Look at the Harlequins, and so I guess my first thing that I did here really was put together a small release show that was also a fundraiser for the National Audubon, not National, but Portland Audubon Society, and it was very small. I was very new, so it was a very small event. I feel like a lot of my time here has been just trying to get my foot in the door. But it was, shortly after that, I started working with Don Jones Redstone, who you interviewed previously, on a music video for my song Overwintered. And we were working on that for several months and finally filmed it right before I left for a Europe tour. And so I feel like from that point, it's like, instead of being really in Portland, I was kind of representing Portland for the first time as a new Portlander. So after the Europe tour, on the way back, I got a very exciting opportunity that was to go to National Audubon Society headquarters in New York and for an interview, and they premiered the music video for me, and so that was the biggest press that I've ever gotten, and I think still have gotten. And so that was really, really exciting, and it was exciting to go there, and it's so much, I don't know, as far as now being a Portlander, it's just, there's so much more cultural cachet when you're traveling to say I'm from Portland. I moved from Eugene, and so it's like no one has heard of that place, unless for its hippiedom and everything. But Portland people have heard of, and so it's like as soon as I moved here, I updated all my bios and everything. But so when I got back from that tour and that interview and everything, I put together this event at Literary Arts, that which is a really amazing organization that is downtown, like in a very great location, and they their mission is to engage readers and writers, like supporting writers is one of their missions. And so because I'm also a writer, I've been going to their events since I moved here, and they were super supportive in sponsoring a music video screening that was also a like a reading event. So I put together this little group of queer and queer BIPOC writers, and they read their works. There was Sage Cooper Schick, Nastasia Minto, who'd be a great person to have on this podcast, and
Okay, write that
TJ
down,
Asina.
CJ.
And so it was a really, the point of it, I guess the event, I called it Queer Nature Nurture, and it was like themes related to nature and compassion, because I feel like those are very intertwined. And so I feel like after that, I was pretty much touring, and then the pandemic happened. So I haven't had as many opportunities to do much outside of my home since then.
Yeah. Well, and then are you making stuff in quarantine now? Because
Yes.
if you're not, so you're clearly you're a very live person, you're a very tour-based person, but
Yeah.
what's been happening since quarantine started? Have you been making music from home?
I have, and I have played some shows. It's easy to forget about them because they were in the same space as everything else in my life. My bedroom, but Portland Audubon Society had this birdathon where they were raising money in, I think it was in May or June, and they had me be the Zoom musical guest, and then there was an event supporting Malheur National Wildlife Refuge that they asked me to play for. And it was this like, it was a concert, but it involved like an interactive component of like bingo, like for the birds that are in my songs, and so people were like getting bingos and prizes and things for that.
Oh my. Okay, so well, let's get into this because I think this is the question on everyone's mind is what's the deal with the birds? How did you bring music and birds together? It sounds so seamless when you describe this journey, but it doesn't necessarily connect for me right away. So tell me about that connection.
So I guess the origin of it was that I had experienced a lot of like trauma in my life, and I was going through a lot of therapy, and I needed some kind of mindfulness activity. And so I was going out a lot on bike rides and things. And then one day I saw this bird, a Western tanager, which it's this really like vibrant yellow and red and black bird that it doesn't look like anything that you would see in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, if you didn't know that they exist here. And so I was just like blown away, and I was like, is this a bird that got out of somebody's like cage or something? And it ended up being a native bird, like a neotropical migrant, and it like set this obsession in motion. And so in the birding world, that's called a spark bird. Is the bird that gets you interested in birds. And so that's what happened to me, and pretty soon I was just hooked on birds. And so throughout all that time of like kind of working on my mental health, I wasn't able to write songs. So that was part of why I was working so hard on my mental health issues, is that I was struggling with like creative block. And so the birding stuff intertwined with my starting to write again. And so it was just like, at that point I was just so obsessed that there was no way to leave them out of the music, because it felt like they were, I think of them as like the witnesses to like human drama.
Oh
like,
my god.
Like they are bystanding. I often think it's like at any great historical event or something, there must have been birds there who like their descendants are now like in the places, it's like the birds we see around us. It's like their great 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 grandbird parents we're probably here, before white people ruined everything.
Absolutely. And that's something that I've never thought about once in my life. But you're
Yeah,
so right.
it's, I don't know, it's an interesting thought. And I think about it a lot in terms of like, say, like wars and like catastrophes or something. It's like, who were the birds who were like there when Pompeii like happened
Just
or
watching
something?
it happen.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
yeah. It's very
Yeah.
strange.
And so then you're
Yeah.
using your art to mostly raise funds for organizations that are supporting birds and wildlife. Is
I
that what it
mean,
sort of turned into?
that would be ideal. I think I I'm not sure if it has turned into that. It's certainly the niche that I think I have played into to some extent. But I I think part of what I'm doing is just, well, on the most basic level, is just loving birds and being unable to avoid like mentioning them. But then the other thing is, I think that I want to showcase like the diversity of birds, and maybe get other people interested. Like that's not why I make music, but it's like an added thing. Is that I hope that, because the names are so great, there's just so many wonderful, interesting names. Like I just wrote a song that was inspired by the inaccessible island rail, which is this bird who lives on inaccessible island in the middle of the Atlantic, and so it's sort of a song about like someone who like left it all behind and is like I like isolating themselves. I don't know. Um,
I'm
yeah,
so
I don't know.
excited to hear.
It's just interesting ideas to explore. Like I feel like there's a lot in bird in their like their life histories, I suppose, that can be inspiration, and they can kind of be characters, especially in a time like this where it's like not a lot is happening to me personally. There aren't many interactions to draw. Like there aren't a lot of new interesting experiences that are happening to inspire something. So it's like I looked at pictures of these birds and considered their habitat and things, and I was like, what would it be like to be on this island with no one there? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's one of the interesting through lines I've sort of started to pick up on doing these podcasts is the connection between art and nature and the inspiration that comes through that. Our guest last week is recording audio about nature and putting it in, adjusting it and putting it into songs as well. So like going to rivers and then recording that audio, putting it in, and you're using these birds as an inspiration or a starting point to tell human stories about human experiences through things, even just like their names, which is so interesting. Oh,
Yeah.
and then, okay, whoa. And tell us now about this YA novel. So you're a song, musician, artist, and now you're writing a novel. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's the working title for it is the Northern Great Basin Feminist Bird Club, which I don't know if that will stick, but but
I love it.
the
But
feminist yeah, the Feminist Bird Club is an actual thing, it originally started in Brooklyn, and their mission, I think, it's like an intersectional approach to birding that brings brings awareness to issues, but they raise funds for like Black Lives Matter and for indigenous like efforts, I suppose. And what else do they do? But so they also are helping bring, I guess, create a space where people who have been historically like excluded from outdoor activities like bird watching can get involved, and like and have the sort of like safety in numbers, I suppose, because it can be very intimidating as like a queer person, and like certainly as a person of color, to be out in the middle of nature and like and with binoculars. Like sometimes you get like kind of harassed for that, or like I myself I was looking at birds one time and a cop like stopped me and like asked me all these questions and was like asking me if I was like looking at girls on the river or something, and I was like, I'm looking,
Oh my
and it was
God.
it's sort of a funny story if it weren't so horrifying. But it was like he asked what I was looking at, and I said, so there's a type of bird, a duck called a redhead, and I was like, well, I think so. I was like, maybe he's a birder. I thought maybe he was a birder, and so I was like, I think maybe redheads, and and he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, it's like
Oh
ducks,
my gosh.
and yeah, it was very bizarre. But then of course everyone's heard of what happened with Christian Cooper and Amy Cooper.
Right.
They aren't related, but the black bird watcher in Central Park who was asking the white woman with the dog to leash her dog and follow the leash laws, and then she called the police. And so yeah, so Feminist Bird Club, it's like the point of it is making it so that people of color and queer people, like people who might be harassed for being out in nature, so that they can have access. And so the book that I'm working on, it's kind of about, it takes place at Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, but it's kind of an imagined like cultural and like, I'm trying to think, like ecological hub that isn't really there. I mean, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but I've sort of imagined like, what if there were this vibrant, like diverse community of birders who like
Ooh.
had a cool little place that they like had, you know, like artist in residence, like sort of programs and like really cool resources. And so it's sort of based on my own experience, not with that because that's fictional, but I ran away when I was in high school after coming out, and so my thought was sort of like, what if I had run away to this place in the middle of
Oh.
nowhere and sort of like found ways to heal and to connect with people and have like a chosen family, and while also discovering, you know, like practicing mindfulness in nature and becoming connected with something that would make me, I don't know, like heal, like I said.
And that's where the young adult audience comes in, is you're
Yeah,
writing
yeah.
it for them, the people that want to run away, basically.
Yes. Yeah,
Mm.
and because I think because I think even if you can't run away, I think that birds provide like this escape from your everyday world, even in urban areas. Like, uh, I mean, in Portland, you can see, you know, maybe up to like 200 or more different species of birds. And so, if you need something, if you need an escape from reality, it can be a very like useful one. Like, they're
Mm.
very present, and sometimes just it's like a lot of mindfulness sort of exercises are, you know, listening and like engaging your senses. And I know that once I started learning, say, like bird songs, being able to identify different calls and songs, it's like I can be inside a building and talking to someone and then hear this really distant, tiny sound that I'm like, oh, that was, you know, that was this bird. And so it really like brings you to the present moment in
Mm.
a way that I feel like nothing else has done for me.
Wow. Yeah, I never. You are just illuminating all of these things for me
We
that
should
I
go
can
birding.
apply. Yes, that sounds so lovely now. Ah, and it's such an outdoor, socially distant activity for these
Yes.
times, honey.
Yes.
Okay. Whoa. Love that. Let's get into then our sort of second segment. And I know you've only sort of been
Mm.
here for a couple of years, but what have you noticed since you've arrived? What are the things you like about the Portland art scene, and what are the things you kind of are hoping for, areas that we could improve on in the Portland art scene?
Mm. So I think before moving here, I thought like, oh, I'm gonna move to this like bigger city and everything's gonna be different or something. Like it's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
so easy to find all the opportunities that I've always dreamed of. And then I moved here, and it was kind of a disappointment, I suppose. I think um, it was maybe fortunate that at the time that I moved here, I was starting to lean into the writing side of things because I think the writing community is just so welcoming, and you know there's this I feel like they really have an abundance mindset of like we can never have too many writers, and every voice is important, and we all need to support each other because writing is such an isolated kind of task that we really need each other, and there's such an appreciation for the struggle of it. In the music community, I feel like it's the total opposite. I feel like it's a scarcity mindset of like there are only so many opportunities to go around, and we're all in competition for them, and it feels like I know that I have felt so much professional jealousy, and it just like was eating away at me to the point where I feel like I kind of opted out, and like now I'm like, whatever happens, like I'm getting some gigs here and there, and I'm not gonna like, I don't want to spend my whole life trying to impress gatekeepers. And I think that like the venues, I think that like there's only so much they can do in terms of what they offer to artists because they have to make money too. So like when it's all wrapped up in this like capitalist system, it's just there's no way it can be as supportive as the writing community, I think. And so yeah, I think I'm kind of disillusioned with it, which is, I don't know. I mean, my goal in like talking in an interview would be to be like very kind, but I feel like I'm sounding very cynical, and I've only been here for a short time. But
we need this honest feedback too. We need this sort of reflective look to improve.
Yeah, I think the music community would do very well to model itself more on the writing community in terms of like, it's like, I don't know, the music community will have, like networking events and stuff. And I just feel like, I don't know if networking is the way, like networking and calling it networking, I feel like it just has the wrong vibe for, I don't know, people really need an opportunity to be earnest and connect on a level that isn't about like sort of trying to show off what you've done and like, and show the like Instagram perfect version of your life and like make connections that are going to like, move you up. I think that the writing community is very much like, lift as you rise. And it feels like the music community is like scrambling to find people who will lift you at the expense of the people who are further down on the ladder. But I think there are some places where, say like Artichoke Music is a place that it's kind of like literary arts in that it's a cultural center that has, events, showcases of songwriters where the audiences are attentive and supportive, and they have music classes. And I think that cultural centers are really what we need more of. And I think that in my touring, like those are the places that really stand out as the ones that you have like these heartfelt shows where where it feels like you've been a part of something really special at the end of the night. And speaking of nights, I feel like we need more shows that happen earlier in the day. Because I'm not a night person. I would love to have like a culture of Sunday afternoon shows or something. That just sounds so nice. Going to bed early, maybe a morning show even, like an 8 a.m.
Yes. Yeah, this is a take I have not heard. I'm going to be honest, and I don't know how I feel about it yet, but interesting idea. Earlier shows, yeah. Well, because sometimes it's like, I don't know, the only slot they'll offer you is like 10 p.m. or something, and I'm like, I am in bed at 9:30. I don't know. So maybe, I mean, in a way, like the pandemic has worked very well for me because I'm like, I never have to stay up late for something just to like try to further my career. Exactly.
I can live stream whenever I want.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think you can probably move on.
Well, I think you touched on a lot of it, but yeah, what is the future of the Portland art scene? What are your hopes and dreams for it? And it sounds like we definitely want earlier shows as options. We want more of this abundance mindset, which I love that you bring up, less scarcity mindset. Is there anything else that you're thinking like this is the future of Portland art needs?
I think, so an event series that has stood out to me as being something we need more of is Renee Muski's. She has this Renee's Queer Cabaret. Ooh. And I feel like it's really this cool opportunity for people whose art like falls outside the box. And I think that that's what we need more of. We need more opportunities for like the weird queer like musicians in Portland, like the people who aren't just making like mainstream stuff, who aren't like, I don't know, doing like sort of the Portland version of top 40 things or something.
Gotcha.
I feel like we need more space for like, yeah, the weirdos, the people who are, I mean, maybe that's just self-serving. That's why I'm thinking it. It's like, well, I don't fit into the box, and so I want more opportunities for people who don't fit in the box. But I think that would help a lot with, I don't know, like musicians need to be able to be ambitious while also not like losing their humanity. And I think that like the way things are, like with it all being about capitalism and like, you know, who has the biggest draw and who like can sell the most drinks, like that just isn't a healthy way for artists to be working. And another really cool thing that happened recently that that I think we need more of is I don't know if you know of the artist collective Future Prairie.
No, that sounds awesome though.
Yeah, they're here in Portland. I'm not actually technically a part of it, though they did give me free access to masterclass, which is really awesome.
Okay.
But yeah, that was really cool. But so that's a cool thing that they did. But another thing is that I think they collaborated with, I don't know what the company was. I think it's like Wacom Tablets. I don't really know anything about that. But they gave 3-month like creative basic income to so like three artists got a 3-month creative basic income
to just focus on their art.
Yeah. And so like obviously people need to be able to like have a livelihood from their art, and so that's part of why we end up getting competitive. But I think if only there could be some kind of, I mean, I suppose like a residency or like fellowships are one way to do that, but yeah, we need to be able to support artists financially, and I think that would really solve the competitiveness that I think can really like eat away at us. I mean, I think a lot of artists, the professional jealousy like gets to them, and I don't know how it is in other realms like filmmaking, but
yeah, it's interesting that like we obviously don't want a scarcity mindset, but then the entire world we're operating in is built off of a scarcity mindset. So it's like, how do we exist in a space that is so destined to lead us towards scarcity? Yeah, really good insight, really good thoughts. Thank you so much. I mean, our time just flew by. That was riveting.
It did, yeah.
Yeah, where can people find you online, Stephan?
StephanNance.com, which my name is spelled funny, StephanNance. And Instagram, I'm weirdly active on Twitter. I know that's not a big thing anymore, but it is big in the bird world. So yeah, bird Twitter. Twitter.
Okay.
That is where it's at. But so I am there, and I just started a Patreon. So currently I have one patron, but so maybe one of these listeners will be number 2.
Okay, that's up to all y'all listening. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and y'all, for reals, listen to Stephan's music. It goes off. It really is exactly what I needed today and in this sort of dark time. It covers some heavy issues in such a hopeful way, which is really all I'm looking for. Well, thank you so much, Stephan, for being on, and thank you so much for listening to the podcast, y'all. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Creating Portland with me, Pearson Kunz. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe, and check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Creating PDX, or on our website, creatingpdx.com. This podcast was brought to you by Wolf and Thunder Productions and Golden Pride Productions. See you next time. Bye!